Hi, I'm Emma. My parents called me lazy after I quietly paid their mortgage for 5 years. When I finally stood up for myself, they kicked me out of family dinners. Then they tried to refinance the house, the home I'd been saving, without telling me. But that wasn't even the worst part. They showed up at my workplace. They spread rumors through our community. They even opened credit cards in my name. Now, I have one question that keeps me awake at night. How far will your own family go when you stop living up to their expectations? What would you have done? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to follow for more stories like mine. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Part 1. The rain tapped against my windshield as I sat in the parking lot of Timber Brew, gathering my courage. Inside, my parents waited, probably already nursing their drinks, Dad's black coffee, Mom's chai latte. This wasn't our usual meeting spot. I'd chosen neutral territory, somewhere public enough to keep voices civil but quiet enough for difficult conversations. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. Dark circles under my eyes betrayed the 3 consecutive nights I'd spent reviewing financial documents, tracing every transfer, every payment, every sacrifice I'd made over the past 5 years. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for my leather portfolio containing printouts of bank statements and transfer receipts. "You can do this," I whispered to myself, a habit I'd developed over years of internal pep talks before family gatherings. When I stepped inside, the warm scent of coffee and pastries momentarily calmed my nerves. My parents sat at a corner table, their faces lighting up when they spotted me. For a fleeting moment, guilt crept in. Was I about to destroy that happiness? But then I remembered last Sunday's dinner, the words that had finally broken the dam. If you weren't so lazy with your money, you could afford a house by now instead of wasting it on that downtown apartment, Dad had said, passing the green beans to Tyler without looking at me. Your brother might not have a conventional job, but at least he's pursuing his passion. What do you have to show for all those hours at the office? Mom had nodded in agreement, adding, "A woman your age should be settled by now. What are you saving for, Emma? You never even take vacations." They didn't know I had been saving their house while they remortgaged it to fund Tyler's 3rd attempt at starting a band. They didn't know I had sacrificed my own dreams of traveling, of buying my own place, of building my retirement fund, all to keep them from losing everything after Dad's medical emergency 5 years ago. "Hi, sweetie," Mom said now, rising to hug me. She smelled like the same jasmine perfume she'd worn since I was a child. "We ordered you a mocha, extra whip, just how you like it." I slid into the seat across from them, placing my portfolio on the table like a shield. "Thanks." Dad leaned forward, his face serious. "Is everything okay? You don't usually call meetings like this." I took a deep breath. "No, actually, everything isn't okay." Their expressions shifted. Concern, confusion, perhaps a flicker of defensiveness. I opened my portfolio and removed the first statement. 5 years ago, after Dad's surgery, I discovered something while helping organize your finances. The house was 3 months behind on mortgage payments. You were on the verge of foreclosure. Mom's eyes widened. Dad's jaw tightened. I didn't say anything because I knew how proud you both are. Instead, I set up automatic transfers from my account to yours, timed to hit the day before your mortgage payment was due. I slid the bank statements across the table. 5 years of transfers, highlighted in yellow. 60 months of financial support, never acknowledged because they never knew. I've been paying your mortgage for 5 years. That's why I can't afford a house. That's why I live in a tiny apartment. That's why I never take vacations. The silence that followed felt physical, pressing against my skin. Dad's face had gone pale. Mom's hands trembled as she reached for the papers. "Why are you showing us this now?" Dad finally asked, his voice unusually small. I met his gaze steadily. Because I can't do it anymore. The comments about my lifestyle, the comparisons to Tyler, the criticism about my choices, it's too much. I've been sacrificing everything while being called lazy and selfish. Mom shook her head, tears forming. We never knew, Emma. How could we have known? You could have checked your own financial statements, I said quietly. You could have wondered why, despite remortgaging for Tyler's projects, you never fell behind again. You could have asked why I work so much overtime instead of assuming I'm just a workaholic with nothing to show for it. Dad's expression hardened. You should have told us. We're not mind readers. And there it was, the deflection I'd expected. Not gratitude, not shock at their own oversight. Just a quick pivot to make it my fault again. I'm not here to argue about what should have happened, I continued, keeping my voice steady. I'm here because I'm stopping the payments. I've set up a 3-month transition fund to give you time to adjust your finances. But after that, the mortgage is yours again. They exchanged a look I'd seen many times. The Emma is being difficult look that usually preceded a united front. This feels like some kind of ambush, Dad said, pushing the statements back toward me. You secretly pay our bills for years, never saying a word, then throw it in our faces like we've done something wrong? Robert, Mom cautioned, placing a hand on his arm. I closed my eyes briefly, centering myself. I'm not throwing it in your faces. I'm simply informing you of a change in financial arrangements that will affect you. I thought you deserved to know why. And what about family loyalty? Dad pressed. We raised you, put you through college. On scholarships I earned, I interjected quietly. Provided a home, security, everything you needed. And now you're what? Keeping score? The coffee shop suddenly felt too warm, too close. A couple at a nearby table glanced over, sensing the tension. I'm not keeping score. I'm setting boundaries. I can't keep sacrificing my financial future while being called lazy for the consequences of those sacrifices. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. We appreciate everything you've done, Emma. We do. It's just, this is a lot to process. I nodded, softening slightly at her tone. I understand. That's why I'm giving you 3 months to adjust. I've prepared a breakdown of your monthly expenses and some suggestions for balancing your budget without my contribution. I pulled out another document, sliding it across the table. Financial analyst to the core, even in family crises. Dad didn't touch it. Does Tyler know about this? The question stung more than it should have. Of course, that would be his concern. Not how I felt, not the years of silent support, but whether the favored child knew. No, this is between us. He'll be devastated if we have to downsize, Mom said, her voice quavering. His studio space? In the basement. I have to go, I said abruptly, gathering my things. I couldn't sit through another round of how my decisions would impact Tyler. Take some time to think about what I've said. I'm available if you want to discuss budget adjustments. As I stood, Dad's expression darkened. So that's it? Drop a bomb and walk away? What about Sunday dinner? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I hesitated, my hand clutching the portfolio. I think I'll skip this week. Give everyone some space. Running away won't fix this, Emma, he said, loud enough that several heads turned our way. I leaned down, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm not running away. I'm finally taking care of myself. There's a difference. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the sky remained heavy with clouds. I made it to my car before the tears came, hot and silent down my cheeks. Not from sadness. Exactly, from release. 5 years of silence, of swallowed comments, of redirected dreams, finally acknowledged, even if not understood. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. We need to talk more about this. Family dinner Sunday. Please come." I set the phone down, without replying, and drove toward downtown, toward my small but beautifully decorated apartment with the balcony overlooking the park, the home I'd chosen and made my own, despite their dismissal of it. For the first time in years, I felt lighter, even with the uncertainty ahead. The truth had been spoken. Now I just had to live with the consequences. That evening, I canceled my usual Friday takeout order, a small luxury I'd maintained even while pinching pennies elsewhere, and made myself pasta instead. My apartment was quiet, just the occasional car passing on the street below and the soft whirring of my refrigerator. I opened my journal, a leather-bound book Olivia had given me when I started therapy last year, and began writing the day's events. Unlike the digital files and folders where I tracked finances, this journal was for emotional processing, the record of my journey toward setting boundaries. Halfway through recounting the coffee shop conversation, my phone rang. Tyler's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated before answering. "Hello? What the hell, Emma?" His voice was tight with anger. "I just spent 2 hours listening to Mom cry. What did you say to them?" I closed my eyes, imagining the scene at the family home. Of course they'd gone straight to Tyler. Of course they'd presented themselves as victims. "I told them the truth about who's been paying their mortgage for the past 5 years, I said, keeping my voice even. A pause. "What are you talking about? They didn't fill you in on that part?" I couldn't help the bitter laugh. That escaped. "Interesting." I explained briefly about the payments, the criticism, the decision to stop. "That's..." Tyler seemed genuinely stunned. "I had no idea." "I know you didn't. This isn't about you. But it affects me too, Emma. If they lose the house..." "They won't lose the house unless they choose to," I interrupted. "They have jobs. They have options. They just need to live within their means." "Like downsize? Move somewhere smaller? What about my recording equipment?" I pressed my fingers to my temple, where a headache was forming. "Tyler, I've put my life on hold for 5 years. I've delayed buying my own home, cut back on everything, worked overtime until I'm exhausted, all to support a household I don't even live in. I can't do it anymore." "So you're just abandoning the family when they need you? Real nice, Em." The nickname, usually affectionate, sounded like an accusation now. "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm simply stopping a financial arrangement that was never acknowledged or appreciated." "You could have told them sooner. You could have..." "I need to go," I said, suddenly exhausted. "We can talk another time when you're ready to listen." I ended the call before he could respond, then switched my phone to silent. Setting boundaries was one thing. Having the strength to maintain them was proving to be another challenge entirely. The following morning, I met Olivia for our weekly coffee date at Timber Brew, this time at our usual table by the window. She listened intently as I recounted the previous day's confrontation, her expression shifting between shock, sympathy, and occasional flashes of righteous anger on my behalf. "So they immediately made it about how you should have told them sooner?" she asked, shaking her head. "Not, 'thank you,' or 'we're sorry for taking you for granted'?" I stirred my mocha absently. I didn't really expect gratitude. Maybe some acknowledgement of the sacrifice, though. "And Tyler called to make it about his recording studio?" Olivia's tone made her opinion of my brother clear. "To be fair, he didn't know about the mortgage payments either." "Stop defending them, Emma," she said gently. "You've been doing that your whole life, making excuses for how they treat you. It's okay to be angry." I nodded, feeling the truth of her words. Years of therapy had helped me understand the dynamics at play, the subtle emotional manipulation, the different standards for my brother and me, the cultural expectations that made breaking free so difficult. "I am angry," I admitted. "But mostly I'm just sad. I wanted them to see me, really see me. And they still couldn't do it. Olivia reached across the table, squeezing my hand. What's your plan now? Stick to the boundary. 3 months of transitional payments, then I'm done. Use the extra money to build my own future. And Sunday dinner? I sighed. I don't know. Mom wants me there, but I'm not sure I'm ready to face everyone yet. Whatever you decide, I'm here, Olivia said. Movie night at my place is always an option if you need an excuse to skip. I smiled gratefully, reminded once again of the chosen family I'd built around me over the years. Friends who saw my worth without conditions or expectations. As we were finishing our coffee, my phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Your mother is upset. We need to resolve this as a family. Sunday dinner, 5 p.m. No please, no acknowledgement of my feelings. Just another demand wrapped in family obligation. I showed the text to Olivia, who raised an eyebrow. Translation. Come let us make you feel guilty until you change your mind. Pretty much, I agreed, sliding the phone back into my purse without replying. By Sunday afternoon, anxiety had formed a tight knot in my stomach. After much deliberation, I'd decided to attend dinner, not out of obligation, but because avoiding the situation wouldn't make it disappear. I needed to hold my boundary firmly and clearly, without the emotional shield of distance. I drove to the familiar Beaverton neighborhood, past the park where I'd learned to ride a bike, the corner store where I'd bought ice cream as a teenager, the high school where I'd graduated as valedictorian to my parents' polite but muted pride. The family home looked the same as always, modest but well-maintained, with Mom's carefully tended roses lining the front walk. I'd always loved this house, had felt proud to protect it when I discovered how close they'd come to losing it. Now, looking at it, I felt a complicated mix of attachment and resentment. I parked behind Tyler's beat-up Subaru and took a deep breath before heading to the door. Before I could knock, it swung open to reveal Mom, her eyes anxious but her smile fixed in place. Emma, come in, come in. I'm making your favorite, orange chicken. An obvious attempt at softening me up. I returned her hug briefly before stepping inside. The house smelled like home. Ginger, garlic, the lingering scent of the jasmine incense Mom burned every morning, a practice she'd brought from Taiwan and maintained all these years in America. Dad sat in his usual armchair, reading, glasses perched on his nose as he scrolled through something on his tablet. He looked up as I entered, his expression unreadable. Emma. Dad. Tyler emerged from the basement, hair tousled as if he'd just woken up despite it being late afternoon. He gave me an awkward nod before disappearing into the kitchen, presumably to help Mom, a task I'd never seen him volunteer for before. I settled on the couch, the familiar cushions offering no comfort today. How was your week? Dad asked, setting his tablet aside. A normal question for an abnormal situation. Busy. We're working on a new investment portfolio for a major client. Safe, neutral work talk. He nodded. Good, good. Always working hard, our Emma. The comment, which might have seemed complimentary to an outsider, carried an undercurrent I recognized too well. Our Emma, the reliable one. Our Emma, the workhorse. Our Emma, defined by her productivity. Mom called us to dinner before the awkward small talk could continue. We gathered around the dining table, me in my usual seat, Tyler across from me, parents at either end. The orange chicken sat in the center alongside rice, steamed broccoli, and spring rolls. As we served ourselves, Mom maintained a stream of cheerful commentary about neighborhood happenings and distant relatives' achievements. The forced normalcy was almost worse than confrontation. Finally, after we'd all taken a few bites, Dad cleared his throat. So, we need to discuss this situation. And there it was. I set down my fork, straightening in my chair. We've been thinking about what you said, he continued, about the mortgage payments. Mom nodded earnestly. We had no idea you'd been doing that, Emma? None at all. I know, I said simply. And we appreciate it, Dad added, though his tone suggested what was coming next would contradict that sentiment. But the way you went about it, secretly paying, then springing it on us with no warning, that wasn't right. I felt my jaw tighten. Would you have accepted if I'd offered directly? A pause. Dad and Mom exchanged glances. That's not the point, Dad said finally. Family helps family. That's how it works. But family also communicates. You're right. I agreed, surprising them. Family should communicate. Like when you remortgaged the house to fund Tyler's recording equipment without telling me, even though I was making the payments. Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Mom's eyes widened. We didn't think, she began, that I needed to know, I finished for her, or that I deserved to know. You're twisting things, Dad said, his voice hardening. We're your parents. We don't need your permission for financial decisions. You do when I'm the one paying the bills. The table fell silent, the only sound the gentle click of the wall clock marking seconds. I think what Dad means, Tyler ventured, is that there are better ways to handle disagreements than suddenly cutting everyone off. I turned to him, oddly calm. I'm not cutting anyone off, Tyler. I'm simply stopping a financial arrangement that wasn't working for me anymore. And I gave 3 months' notice, which is more consideration than most banks would offer. There. You go again treating family like a business transaction, Dad said, throwing his napkin down. This cold, calculating approach, this isn't how we raised you. No, I agreed quietly. You raised me to put family first, always. To sacrifice without complaint. To give and never expect acknowledgement. Much less gratitude. Mom's eyes filled with tears. That's not fair, Emma. Isn't it? I looked at each of them. When was the last time anyone asked about my dreams? My goals? When was the last time my achievements were celebrated the way Tyler's potential is constantly praised? Tyler had the grace to look embarrassed. We've always been proud of you, Mom insisted. You've always been so capable. Capable, I repeated. Not creative, not passionate, not special, just capable, reliable, useful. You're being dramatic, Dad said dismissively. If you're feeling underappreciated, you could have said something instead of this. Financial ambush. I took a deep breath, trying to stay centered. I'm saying something now. I'm saying I deserve to build my own life, to use my money for my future. I'm saying I can't be the family safety net anymore. So you'll let us lose? The house? Mom asked, her voice small. After everything we've done for you? And there it was, the guilt trip, right on schedule. You won't lose the house unless you choose to. I repeated my words from the conversation with Tyler. You have options. Refinance at a lower rate, take on extra work, cut expenses. I paused, then added gently, ask Tyler to contribute rent, with the money he makes from the coffee shop. Tyler's head snapped up. I barely make enough to cover my student loans. Then maybe it's time to reconsider whether music is a viable full-time career path, I suggested, earning a glare from both him and Dad. We support Tyler's dreams, Dad said firmly, just like we supported yours. I laughed, a short, incredulous sound. My dream was to travel after college, to work abroad for a few years. You told me it was impractical and irresponsible. That was different. You had job offers here, opportunities. It's always different when it's me, I said, suddenly, tired of the circular conversation. My point is, I've supported this family financially for 5 years. I've done my part, and then some. Now I need to take care of my own future. I stood up, my dinner barely touched. Where are you going? Mom asked, alarmed. We haven't resolved anything. I've said what I came to say, The payments will continue for 3 more months, and then they'll stop. That's not negotiable. Dad stood as well, his face flushed with anger. If that's your attitude, then maybe you shouldn't come back until you've thought about what family really means. The words hit like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. If treating me like a resource rather than a daughter is what family means to you, then maybe I need to rethink some things too. I walked to the door, hands steady despite the emotions churning inside. Behind me, I heard Mom's soft crying, Tyler's murmured comfort, Dad's heavy sigh. I hesitated at the threshold, part of me still hoping someone would call me back, would apologize, would see me. No one did. Outside, the evening air was cool against my heated skin. I made it to my car before the first tear fell, quickly brushed, away. This wasn't defeat, I reminded myself. This was the cost of reclaiming my life, a price steep but necessary. As I drove back toward Portland, the family home growing smaller in my rearview mirror, I felt both heavier and lighter. Something had ended tonight, but perhaps something else was just beginning. The following Tuesday, I buried myself in spreadsheets, at work, finding comfort in the orderly rows of numbers that, unlike family dynamics, followed predictable rules. I'd barely slept since Sunday's disastrous dinner, replaying my father's words over and over. Maybe you shouldn't come back until you've thought about what family really means. My office phone rang, startling me out of my concentration. Emma Chen speaking, I answered, keeping my voice professionally neutral despite the emotional exhaustion weighing on me. Ms. Chen, there's someone here to see you. The receptionist's voice sounded strained. A Mr. and Mrs. Chen? They say they're your parents. My stomach dropped. My parents are here? At the office? Yes, they're quite insistent on seeing you. Should I send them up or… I glanced at my watch. Nearly noon. No, I'll come down. Thank you, Valerie. Heart pounding, I smoothed my pencil skirt and checked my reflection in my darkened computer screen. What could be so urgent that they'd show up at my workplace? In 15 years of working, they'd never once visited any of my offices. The elevator, ride to the lobby, felt eternal. When the doors finally opened, I spotted them immediately. Mom in her best blouse, Dad standing stiffly beside her, both looking out of place among the suited professionals crossing the marble-floored lobby. Mom? Dad? I said as I approached. Is everything okay? Mom stepped forward, her expression a mixture of worry and determination. Emma, we need to talk about the house. I glanced around, acutely aware of curious glances from colleagues. This isn't a good place for a personal conversation. I have a lunch break in 20 minutes. We could go to the cafe down the street. We went to the bank yesterday, Dad interrupted, his voice louder than necessary, to discuss refinancing options like you suggested. A woman passing by slowed her pace, clearly eavesdropping. I felt heat rising to my cheeks. That's good, I said quietly. Let's discuss the details somewhere private. They pulled up our mortgage records, Mom continued, either oblivious to or unconcerned with our audience. They showed us all the payments, every month, for 5 years. Her voice cracked. They asked why we were inquiring about refinancing when our daughter had been handling everything so efficiently. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course, the bank would have records of exactly where the payments came from. Of course, they would mention it. Mrs. Chen, Mr. Chen, came a voice from behind me. I turned to see James, my colleague, standing there with a concerned expression. Is everything all right? Emma, do you need assistance? Before I could answer, Dad spoke. You're her coworker? Did you know about this? About her paying our mortgage? In secret for years while we thought everything was fine? James blinked in surprise. I should give you some privacy. No need, I said quickly, mortified. Mom, Dad, let's go outside. Please. I ushered them toward the exit, feeling dozens of eyes on my back. Once on the sidewalk, I turned to face them, struggling to maintain my composure. "Why would you come to my workplace like this? This is completely inappropriate." Dad's face hardened. "Inappropriate? You know what's inappropriate? Finding out from a bank manager that your daughter has been controlling your finances behind your back for years, making us look like we can't take care of ourselves." "I wasn't controlling anything," I protested. "I was helping when you couldn't make the payments. There's a difference." "The bank thinks you're some kind of financial guardian for us now," Mom said, distress evident in her voice. "Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" I felt a flash of anger. "About as humiliating as being called lazy and selfish by my own parents when I've been sacrificing my financial future for theirs? About as humiliating as having my workplace invaded for a family dispute?" A young man passing by slowed down, openly staring at our confrontation. I lowered my voice. "I can't do this here. I'm at work. Professional boundaries exist for a reason." "Boundaries?" Dad scoffed. "That's all you talk about lately. What about family loyalty? What about respect for your elders?" "Respect goes both ways," I said quietly. Mom's expression softened slightly. "We just want to understand, Emma. Why didn't you tell us? Why keep it a secret all these years?" The genuine confusion in her voice made me pause. Did they truly not see it? Because every time I tried to talk about money, about my concerns for your financial situation, you shut me down. You told me I was being negative, that I didn't understand what family meant. You praised Tyler for pursuing his passion regardless of the cost, while criticizing me for being too focused on financial security, the very security that was keeping your house safe. Dad shook his head dismissively. "You're exaggerating. We've always valued your opinion." "Have you?" I challenged. "When was the last time you took my advice about anything? When was the last time you even asked for it?" A tense silence fell between us. A few feet away, a businessman on his phone was clearly trying to listen while pretending not to. "I need to get back to work," I said finally. "This conversation isn't productive, and I won't have my professional reputation damaged by a public argument." "So that's it?" Dad demanded. "Your job is more important than resolving this family crisis?" "This isn't about my job. This is about appropriate time and place, which this isn't." I took a deep breath. "If you want to have a calm discussion, we can schedule a time after work hours, in a private setting." Mom touched Dad's arm, restraining him as he opened his mouth to retort. "Fine," she said. "Tonight. Our house. 7:00. I shook my head. "Not your house. Somewhere neutral. The park near Timber Brew, maybe." Dad's expression darkened further, but Mom nodded. "The park. 7:00. "I'll be there," I promised, then turned and walked back into the building, my legs trembling slightly with adrenaline. When I returned to my floor, the curious glances and sudden silences told me that word of the lobby confrontation had already spread. James stopped by my office almost immediately. "Everything okay?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. I managed a tight smile. "Family stuff. Nothing to worry about. Look, I don't mean to pry, but if you need to take the rest of the day..." "I'm fine," I insisted, perhaps too quickly. "Really, just a miscommunication." He seemed unconvinced, but nodded. "If you need anything, let me know." After he left, I sat at my desk, staring blindly at my computer screen. The familiar shame washed over me. The same feeling I'd had as a child when my parents would argue with teachers or coaches on my behalf, making scenes that left me shrinking into myself, wishing for invisibility. By the time 5:00 arrived, 3 separate colleagues had checked on me, each interaction making me feel more exposed. I packed up quickly, avoiding the elevator in favor of the stairs to minimize potential encounters. In my car, I finally allowed myself a moment of complete vulnerability, resting my forehead against the steering wheel as tears threatened. Why couldn't they understand what they'd done? How could they justify invading the one space where I felt competent, respected, in control? I drove home to change before the park meeting, my mind racing with all the things I wanted to say but probably wouldn't. The confrontation had shifted something in me, hardened my resolve, strengthened the boundary I'd drawn in ways I hadn't anticipated. My apartment welcomed me with quiet simplicity. I changed from my work clothes into jeans and a sweater, somehow needing the armor of casualness for what was to come. As I washed my face, removing the makeup that had hidden my exhaustion throughout the day, I stared at my reflection. "You're doing the right thing," I told myself aloud. "You deserve your own life." The park was less crowded than I'd expected for a spring evening. I spotted my parents immediately, sitting tensely on a bench near the duck pond. They hadn't brought Tyler this time. A small mercy. "Thank you for coming," I said as I approached, determined to set a civil tone. Mom nodded. Dad merely grunted, his arms crossed defensively. I sat on the bench opposite them, the wooden slats cool beneath my jeans. For a moment, we just watched the ducks paddling peacefully across the water, oblivious to the human drama unfolding nearby. "What happened at the bank?" I asked finally, cutting straight to the issue. Mom sighed. "We went to discuss refinancing options like you suggested. The manager pulled up our account history and mentioned how reliable the payments had been. Then he said something about your consistent transfers and asked if we were changing the arrangement." We had no idea what he was talking about, Dad added, his voice quieter now. "He showed us the records. Every payment for 5 years, coming from your account. He thought we knew." I nodded slowly. "And now you do." "Why, Emma?" Mom asked, leaning forward. "Why go to such lengths to hide it from us?" I considered my words carefully, wanting to be honest without being needlessly hurtful. At first, it was just going to be temporary. You were struggling after Dad's surgery, and I had the means to help. I thought things would turn around in a few months. "And when they didn't?" Dad prompted. I tried to bring it up. "Remember when I suggested creating a family budget about 4 years ago? You said you didn't need financial advice from your daughter, that you'd been managing money since before I was born." Dad's expression flickered with recognition. "Then when Tyler needed money for his first recording equipment and you were considering a home equity loan, I tried again. I suggested he start with something more modest, build up to the professional setup. You said I didn't understand artistic passion, that I was too practical. Those conversations weren't about the mortgage," Dad protested weakly. "No, but they showed me that you weren't open to my input about financial matters. So I just kept paying. It became routine. And the longer it went on, the harder it became to bring up." A jogger passed by, his footsteps fading into the distance. In the pond, a duckling separated from its mother, quacking frantically until they reunited. "We would have listened," Mom insisted, though her tone lacked conviction. "Would you?" I asked gently. "When have you ever taken my advice over Tyler's? When have you ever acknowledged that my practical nature might be valuable, not just boring?" Neither answered immediately. A breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of blooming flowers. "We never meant to make you feel less important," Mom finally said, her voice small. "I know you didn't mean to," I acknowledged. "But you did, and now here we are." Dad cleared his throat. "So, what happens now? You said 3 more months of payments?" "Yes. That should give you time to adjust your budget, maybe find additional income sources. The mortgage isn't unmanageable on your combined salaries if you're careful." "And if we can't make it work?" There was a vulnerability in Dad's question that I'd rarely heard before. "Then you might need to consider downsizing," I said as kindly as I could. "Many people your age do. It doesn't mean failure." Dad looked away, his profile rigid against the setting sun. The house has been our home for 30 years. Your childhood home. I know, I said softly. And I have wonderful memories there. But it's just a building. What matters is that you're secure in your retirement, not struggling to maintain a space bigger than you need. And what about Tyler's studio? Mom asked. I sighed, fighting the familiar irritation. Tyler is 26 years old. If music is his passion, he needs to find a way to fund it himself. That's part of being an adult. You don't understand how hard the arts industry is, Dad began. Dad? I interrupted firmly. This isn't about Tyler. This is about you and Mom finding financial stability without my assistance. Tyler's career choices are his responsibility, not yours, and certainly not mine. An uncomfortable silence fell. In the distance, children laughed on the playground, the sound carrying clearly through the evening air. You came to my workplace today, I said after a while. Do you understand why that was inappropriate? Mom had the grace to look embarrassed. We were upset after the bank. We weren't thinking clearly. You humiliated me in front of my colleagues, I continued. People I have to work with every day. My professional reputation is important to me. We're your parents, Dad said, though with less certainty than before. Family comes first. Not like that, I said firmly. There are boundaries that shouldn't be crossed, even for family, especially for family. You've changed, Dad observed, not unkindly. You used to be more flexible. I considered this. Maybe I've just stopped bending until I break. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the grass. A park attendant began his rounds, emptying trash cans with methodical movements. I should go, I said, standing. It's getting late. Mom stood as well, hesitating before asking, Will you come to Sunday dinner this week? I hadn't expected the invitation after our last encounter. I don't think that's a good idea right now. We all need some space to process. Dad remained seated, looking older somehow in the fading light. Space. That's the modern solution to everything. It's not a solution, I corrected gently. It's a necessity for all of us. Mom stepped forward, enveloping me in a hug that smelled of jasmine and home. Despite everything, I hugged her back, feeling the familiar contours of her shoulders, thinner than I remembered. We do love you, Emma, she whispered, even when we don't understand you. I know, I said, because it was true. Love had never been the question. It was everything else that had become complicated. I walked away first, following the path that led out of the park. I didn't look back, though I wanted to. Sometimes moving forward required facing firmly ahead. The next morning, I arrived at work to find a small cluster of colleagues by the coffee machine, their conversation stopping abruptly when I entered. The familiar heat of embarrassment crept up my neck as I nodded politely and continued to my office. James caught up with me in the hallway. Hey, everything okay after yesterday? Fine, thanks, I said, hoping my tone would discourage further questions. He hesitated, then added in a lower voice, Look, I don't know what's going on, but people are talking. If you need to get ahead of any rumors... My heart sank. What kind of rumors? Nothing specific yet, just speculation. Family drama, financial issues. You know how people are. I did know. Corporate environments could be surprisingly similar to high school sometimes, complete with gossip and social hierarchies. Thanks. For the heads up, I said, genuinely appreciative despite my discomfort. No problem. And for what it's worth, paying your parents' mortgage for years without taking credit? That's pretty admirable in my book. I managed a small smile before continuing to my office, closing the door behind me. Admirability wasn't what I'd been seeking, but it was better than the picture my parents had potentially painted with their public confrontation. I threw myself into work, using the familiar rhythms of financial analysis to steady my mind. By lunchtime, I'd almost forgotten the morning's awkwardness, until my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Is it true your family is facing foreclosure because you cut them off? Heard your parents were desperate at your office yesterday. Susan Park. I stared at the message in disbelief. Susan Park was our neighbor from 2 streets over in Beaverton, a notorious gossip even when I was growing up. How had she gotten my number? And more importantly, what was she telling people? Before I could decide whether to respond, another text arrived from a different unknown number. Emma, Michael Thompson here. Your dad seemed really upset at poker night. Said you're abandoning the family during financial crisis. Anything we can do to help? My father's poker buddy. My hands trembled slightly as I set the phone down. It was happening already. The community mobilization, the spreading of a narrative that cast me as the villain. I closed my eyes, trying to center myself. I could correct every misconception individually, spend hours defending myself to people who had no right to the private details of my life, or I could refuse to engage with the drama altogether. The decision crystallized with surprising clarity. I picked up the phone and typed a single response to Susan Park. My family's financial arrangements are private. Please don't contact me about this again. I sent the same message to Michael, then blocked both numbers. It wouldn't stop the gossip, but it would prevent me from being drawn into explaining myself repeatedly. As I set my phone down, a knock came at my office door. I looked up to see Victoria Pierce, the head of our department, standing there with a concerned expression. Emma, do you have a moment? My stomach tightened. Of course. Please, come in. Victoria closed the door behind her and took a seat across from my desk. In her mid-50s, with impeccably styled silver hair and a reputation for directness, she had always been someone I admired professionally. I'll get straight to the point, she said. There's been some talk about a family situation that spilled into the office yesterday. Normally, I don't involve myself in personal matters, but when they affect the workplace, I need to check in. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral despite the churning in my stomach. I understand. My parents showed up unexpectedly to discuss a private financial matter. It was inappropriate, and it won't happen again. Victoria studied me for a moment. Are you all right? The simple question, asked with genuine concern rather than curiosity, nearly broke through my carefully maintained composure. I'm fine, I assured her. Just dealing with some family boundaries that should have been established long ago. She nodded slowly. I've been there. Family dynamics can be challenging. That's one word for it, I agreed, allowing a small smile. Well, if you need any support, professionally or otherwise, my door is open. You're a valued member of this team, Emma. Your work has always been exceptional. The validation, so freely given in my professional life and so elusive in my personal one, landed like a balm on raw nerves. Thank you, that means a lot. After Victoria left, I sat in the quiet of my office, struck by the contrast between my work environment and my family environment. Here, my contributions were recognized, my boundaries respected, my value acknowledged without constant reminders. The realization strengthened my resolve to create the same healthy dynamics in all areas of my life. That evening, I decided to attend the financial literacy workshop I volunteered with monthly. Teaching basics of budgeting and investing to community, members, particularly immigrant families like my own had become a passion project over the past few years. The irony of helping others establish financial independence while enabling dependence in my own family wasn't lost on me. The community center was busier than usual, with about 15 participants ranging from college students to retirees. For 2 hours, I lost myself in explaining emergency funds, debt-to-income ratios, and retirement planning strategies, finding comfort in the clear principles and appreciative audience. As I was packing up my materials, one of the regular attendees, an older woman named May, who reminded me somewhat of my mother, approached with a shy smile. "Ms. Chen, I wanted to thank you. Last month, you helped me understand my mortgage options. I spoke to my bank and negotiated a better rate. I'm saving $200 every month now." I smiled genuinely. "That's wonderful, May. I'm so glad it worked out." She hesitated, then added, "My daughter wanted me to ask for help for years, but I was too proud. I thought needing financial advice meant I was failing somehow." She shook her head. "Such foolishness. Knowledge is never something to be ashamed of seeking." The parallel to my own situation struck me with unexpected force. "That's very wise," I managed to say, "and very brave of you to overcome that pride. At my age, you learn that pride is a luxury you cannot always afford," she said with a gentle laugh. "Especially when the alternative is unnecessary struggle." I nodded, thinking of my father's resistance to downsizing, my mother's concern about appearances, their shared unwillingness to acknowledge financial realities that had been evident for years. As I drove home, May's words stayed with me. Pride versus unnecessary struggle. How much of my parents' situation and my enabling of it had been about preserving appearances? About maintaining a lifestyle that looked successful to neighbors and friends, regardless of the hidden cost? My phone rang through the car speakers. Tyler's name appeared on the dashboard display. I hesitated before answering. "Hello? Emma?" His voice sounded strange, subdued, even hesitant. "Can we talk?" "We are talking," I pointed out, navigating through a yellow light. "I mean in person, just you and me, no parents." This was unexpected. Tyler and I had never been particularly close as adults. Our relationship filtered almost entirely through our parents' perspective. "Why?" He sighed. "Because I've been thinking about what you said, about me contributing to the house expenses, about being an adult." I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment building, sitting in the car to finish the conversation. And maybe you have a point," he admitted, the words sounding as if they'd been extracted with considerable effort. "I've been looking at my finances, at what I actually make versus what I spend. It's not great." The admission, small as it was, felt monumental coming from my brother. "That's a start, Tyler. Self-awareness is important." "Yeah, well..." He paused. "Can I buy you coffee tomorrow? I could use some advice about budgeting and stuff." I found myself smiling in the darkness of my car. "Sure. Timber Brew at 10? Thanks, Em, and, sorry about Sunday dinner. I didn't understand what was going on." "I know," I said, feeling a slight easing of the tension I'd been carrying for days. "See you tomorrow." As I ended the call and finally headed up to my apartment, I felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps something positive might emerge from this conflict after all. If Tyler was beginning to recognize his own financial responsibilities, that was progress not just for him, but potentially for our parents as well. Inside my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and made a cup of herbal tea, settling on the couch with my journal. I began to write about the day's events, about Victoria's support, about May's wisdom, about Tyler's unexpected call. As the words flowed onto the page, I realized I was charting not just the external events, but my internal evolution. From silent enabler to self-advocate, from family peacekeeper to boundary defender. The journey wasn't finished. There would be more difficult conversations, more community gossip to ignore, more moments of doubt. But for the first time in years, perhaps ever, I felt like I was writing my own story rather than playing a supporting role in someone else's. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Checking in. How are you holding up after Sunday?" I typed back, "Better than expected." Tyler just called asking for budgeting advice. Small victory. Her response came quickly. Progress. See? Standing your ground works. Proud of you. I smiled, sipping my tea as I looked around my small but perfect apartment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, in this moment, I was at peace with my choices. The path forward might be uncertain, but at least it was finally my own to walk. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Timber Brew as I sipped my mocha, watching the door for Tyler. He was late, typical, but I'd come prepared with my laptop and some work to fill the time. 10 minutes turned to 20, and I was beginning to wonder if he'd changed his mind when the bell above the door chimed and he rushed in, looking disheveled but strangely purposeful. "Sorry I'm late," he said, dropping into the chair across from me. "Bus was delayed." I raised an eyebrow. "You took the bus? What happened to your car?" Tyler grimaced. "Check engine light's been on for weeks. Figured I should stop ignoring it, especially after our conversation about financial responsibility?" I finished for him. He nodded, an uncharacteristic flush creeping up his neck. "Yeah, that." I closed my laptop, giving him my full attention. "So, you wanted budgeting advice?" Tyler ran a hand through his hair, long overdue for a cut, and pulled out his phone. "I made a list of everything I spend money on. It's not pretty." He slid the phone across the table. I scrolled through the Notes app, seeing line items for coffee shop purchases, music equipment payments, streaming subscriptions, takeout meals, rideshare services, and bar tabs. The total at the bottom made my eyes widen. "This is monthly?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Yeah." He looked away, embarrassed. I didn't realize how it all added up until I wrote it down. I handed the phone back. Writing it down is the first step. Most people never even do that much. "So what's the second step, besides panicking?" I smiled despite myself. "Categorizing. Needs versus wants. Fixed expenses versus variable ones." As he flagged down a barista to order, I pulled out a small notebook and pen. When he returned his attention to me, I'd already drawn a simple chart. "Let's start here," I said, sliding it toward him. "Fill in your actual needs first. Rent, utilities, groceries, transportation, medical expenses." Tyler stared at the blank spaces. "I don't pay rent," he admitted, "and my phone is still on Mom and Dad's family plan." I bit back the instinctive criticism. "Okay, let's work with what you do pay for regularly." For the next hour, we deconstructed Tyler's finances, creating a realistic budget that included, for the first time in his adult life, contributions to our parents' household expenses. He was surprisingly receptive, asking thoughtful questions, and taking notes on his phone. "I could probably manage $400 a month toward the mortgage," he said, studying the numbers we'd worked out. "It's not much compared to what you've been paying, but it's a start," I assured him. "And it's not about matching what I've done. It's about contributing what you can." He nodded slowly, then looked up at me with an expression I hadn't seen since we were children. Open, vulnerable, seeking approval. "Do you think they'll take it the wrong way? Like I'm taking your side?" The question revealed the family dynamics at play more clearly than any previous conversation. Sides. As if this were a competition or battlefield, rather than a family trying to find stability. "This isn't about sides, Tyler. It's about everyone doing their part." His coffee sat untouched, growing cold. "They're really scared about losing the house. Dad keeps saying they're too old to start over." I sighed. At 58 and 56, our parents were hardly too old for anything, but I understood the fear. Change is scary at any age, but staying in a situation they can't afford will only lead to more stress and instability. "I know that now," Tyler admitted. "I didn't get it before. When you were paying the mortgage without saying anything, it was easy to believe everything was fine." "That's partly my fault," I acknowledged. I enabled the situation by keeping silent. The barista delivered Tyler's latte, and he wrapped his hands around the mug without drinking, as if just seeking the warmth. "Why did you do it?" he asked. Suddenly. "Pay all that money for years without telling anyone? Without getting any credit?" I considered the question, wanting to give an honest answer. At first, it was an emergency response. Dad was recovering from surgery, Mom had reduced her hours to care for him, and I discovered they were months behind on payments. I thought it would be temporary. But it wasn't. No. And the longer it went on, the harder it became to bring it up. Every time I tried to discuss financial concerns, I was shut down or dismissed. After a while, it just seemed easier to keep paying than to force a confrontation. Tyler looked genuinely perplexed. "But that's so much money. Years of payments." "It was," I agreed. "But family guilt is a powerful motivator, and I've always been the responsible one, the fixer, the steady provider. It's the role I was assigned, and I played it well. Too well." He was quiet for a moment, stirring his latte absently. "I guess I had a role too. The creative one. The one with potential who just needed more time and support." The self-awareness in his tone surprised me. "We all fell into patterns that weren't healthy," I said gently. "But we can create new ones." Tyler nodded, then reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wanted to show you something. I applied for a teaching position at the community music school, assistant instructor for beginner guitar lessons." I took the paper, an email confirmation of his application. "Tyler, that's great. It's not much, part-time entry level, but it's steady income doing something I'm actually qualified for." He shrugged. "Thought it might help with the whole responsible adult thing I'm apparently supposed to be working on." The hint of self-deprecation couldn't mask the underlying pride in his voice. For perhaps the first time, Tyler was taking initiative without being pushed or prodded. "I'm proud of you," I said, meaning it. He looked momentarily startled, then pleased. "Thanks. That actually means a lot, coming from you." We finished our coffees in a companionable silence that felt new and fragile but genuine. As we prepared to leave, Tyler hesitated. "Mom asked me to convince you to come to Sunday dinner this week. Said to tell you she's making your favorite dessert." I shook my head, smiling ruefully. Bribery via cheesecake. Classic Mom. "Are you going to come?" I considered the question seriously. "Not this week. I need more time, and they need to respect that boundary." He nodded, surprising me again with his understanding. "I'll tell them. And Emma, thanks for meeting me today. For the budget, help, and everything else." As Tyler headed for the bus stop and I walked to my car, I felt lighter somehow. The conversation hadn't solved everything, but it represented a shift, small but significant in our sibling dynamic. For once, we'd connected as adults, without our parents' perspectives coloring the interaction. The feeling of cautious optimism carried me through the workday, where thankfully the gossip seemed to have died down somewhat. By late afternoon, I was deeply focused on a complex analysis when my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Code red. "Your mom just showed up at our volunteer center asking about you. Heading your way." My stomach dropped. I volunteered at the Financial Literacy Center twice a month, and Olivia coordinated the program. My mother had never shown interest in my volunteer work before. What could she possibly want now? Before I could respond, my office phone rang. "Emma Chen speaking. Ms. Chen, there's a Patricia Chen here to see you. She says she's your mother." Not again. I closed my eyes briefly, summoning patience. "I'll be right down. Thank you." This time, I took a moment to collect myself before heading to the lobby. Deep breaths, professional demeanor, boundaries. When the elevator doors opened, I spotted Mom immediately. Unlike Dad's confrontational stance during their previous visit, she stood quietly near the reception desk, looking smaller somehow, almost hesitant. "Mom," I said as I approached, "is everything okay?" She clutched her purse strap nervously. "I'm sorry to come to your workplace again. I know you were upset about that before." At least she'd acknowledged it. "What's going on? Could we talk somewhere? Just for a few minutes?" "I won't make a scene, I promise." I glanced at my watch. "My lunch break is in 20 minutes. There's a small courtyard behind the building where we could talk privately." She nodded. "I'll wait." 20 minutes later, we sat on a bench in the landscaped courtyard, surrounded by flowering plants and the gentle sound of a small fountain. The space was empty except for us, offering the privacy this conversation needed. "I went looking for you at that place where you volunteer," Mom began. "The woman there, Olivia, she said you weren't scheduled today." "Olivia's my friend," I explained. "She runs the program. Why were you looking for me there?" Mom twisted her hands in her lap. "I wanted to see it. The place where you teach people about money. I realized I've never seen that part of your life." The admission caught me off guard. "You've never seemed interested before." "I wasn't," she said simply, and that was wrong of me. I waited, sensing there was more she wanted to say. "Your father and I have been talking, a lot, about everything that's happened, everything you said." She paused. "We didn't see it, Emma. How much you were giving, how little we were acknowledging it. We were so focused on Tyler's struggles that we took your stability for granted." War. Words I'd longed to hear for years washed over me, leaving me momentarily speechless. "After you left on Sunday, I found your old journal. From high school. You'd written about wanting to study international business, maybe work in Singapore. Or Hong Kong for a few years." She looked at me directly. "You never mentioned that to us." "I did, actually," I said quietly. "Senior year, when I got the scholarship offer from that program in Taiwan. You and Dad said it was impractical, that I should stay close to home, focus on something with more security." Recognition dawned in her eyes. I'd forgotten, or maybe I didn't really listen in the first place. A business associate walked through the courtyard, nodding politely as he passed. I waited until he was out of earshot before continuing. "Why are you bringing this up now?" Mom took a deep breath. "Because I'm trying to understand who you really are, not just who we expected you to be. The Financial Center Volunteer Coordinator said you've been helping immigrant families understand American banking systems for 3 years. She said you're their most requested advisor." I felt my cheeks warm. "It's just a few hours a month. It's more than that. It's who you are when we're not watching, when you're not playing the role we assigned you." She reached for my hand, hesitantly. "I want to know that person better." The sincerity in her voice touched something deep within me. For the first time in our recent interactions, I felt seen, truly seen, by my mother. "I'd like that," I admitted. "But Mom, it can't be like before. The financial support, the unbalanced expectations, the dismissal of my choices, that all has to change." She nodded. "I know. We're working on it. Your father is struggling more with the adjustment. His own father was very traditional, very authoritarian. This idea of adult children setting boundaries is foreign to him." "I understand that," I said. "But understanding doesn't mean I'll continue to accept being treated like a resource rather than a daughter." "No, it doesn't." She squeezed my hand. "We've made an appointment with a financial advisor, a professional one, not our daughter, and we're exploring options for downsizing." This surprised me. "Really?" Dad seemed so resistant to the idea. He was, still is somewhat, but he's beginning to accept that it might be necessary. She smiled slightly. Tyler's offer to contribute to household expenses helped. It made your father realize he doesn't have to see this as failure. Tyler told you about our budget session? He did. He was quite proud of himself, actually. Said his responsible big sister had shown him how to adult properly. Her impression of Tyler's voice made me smile despite myself. The fountain burbled peacefully as a comfortable silence settled between us. After a moment, Mom spoke again, her voice softer. I keep thinking about all those months we complained about bills, about how tight things were, never realizing you were carrying the heaviest burden. All those times we praised Tyler for tiny steps forward while taking your massive contributions for granted. She looked down. I'm so ashamed, Emma. The raw honesty in her voice brought tears to my eyes that I blinked away quickly. I could have spoken up sooner. Should have, probably. Why didn't you? She asked, genuinely curious. I considered the question. Fear, partly. That you'd be hurt or angry. That you'd see it as a criticism rather than help. But also because I wanted to be needed, to be the reliable one, the one who fixed things. It became part of my identity. Mom nodded slowly. We did that to you, assigned you that role from childhood. The responsible one, the sensible one. We should have let you be more than that. My lunch break was nearly over, but I found myself reluctant to end this moment of genuine connection. I should get back to work soon. Of course. Mom stood, straightening her blouse. Thank you for talking with me, for listening. I stood as well. This was different. Good, different. Will you consider coming to dinner on Sunday? She asked, then quickly added, no pressure. I understand if you need more time. The addition, the acknowledgement of my boundary, made the invitation feel like a choice rather than an obligation for the first time in memory. I'll think about it, I promised. We walked back to the building together, the silence comfortable. In a way it hadn't been for years. At the entrance, Mom hesitated, then hugged me briefly. I love you, Emma. Not for what you do or provide, just for who you are. As she walked away, I felt something shift inside me, a knot of tension loosening, a weight lifting slightly. The journey was far from complete, but this conversation had been a meaningful step forward. Back at my desk, I found myself struggling to refocus on work. Instead, I opened a browser tab and typed International Business Programs into the search bar. For years, I'd suppressed the old dream of working abroad, convinced it was impractical or selfish. Perhaps it was time to revisit that dream, to explore what might still be possible. That evening, I met Olivia for our weekly dinner, this time at a small Thai restaurant we both loved. Over spring rolls and pad Thai, I recounted the surprisingly positive conversation with my mother. Wow, Olivia said, genuinely impressed. That's not what I expected after she showed up at the center asking questions. Me neither, I admitted. I was braced for another confrontation, but she was different, reflective, actually listening. And your dad? Still struggling, according to Mom. But they're seeing a financial advisor, looking at downsizing options. It's progress. Olivia raised her glass. To progress. And to you holding your ground long enough to make it happen. We clinked glasses, and I felt a surge of gratitude for this friend who had supported me through the entire tumultuous journey. Tyler's making changes too, I added. Applied for a teaching position, created a budget, offered to contribute to household expenses. The apocalypse must be near, Olivia teased, then grew serious. Seriously though, that's huge. Your whole family system is reorganizing itself because you had the courage to break the pattern. I hadn't thought of it quite that way, but she was right. By stepping back, I had created space for others to step forward in new ways. I'm thinking about taking some international business courses, I said, the words feeling both terrifying and exhilarating to speak aloud. Maybe pursuing that old dream of working abroad for a while. Olivia's face lit up. Emma, that's amazing. The Singapore thing you talked about in college? Maybe. Or Hong Kong, Taiwan, anywhere really. I've spent so long making practical, responsible choices for everyone else. I want to make an adventurous choice for myself for once. Do it, she encouraged. You've more than earned it. As we finished our meal, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another nosy community member, but something prompted me to check. Emma, this is Susan Park. I owe you an apology for my inappropriate text earlier this week. Your financial arrangements with your family are none of my business, and I'm sorry for getting involved. Wishing you all the best. I showed Olivia, who raised her eyebrows in surprise. That's unexpected. What prompted this sudden attack of conscience? No idea, I said, genuinely puzzled. A second text arrived moments later, this one from Tyler. FYI, I ran into Susan Park at the grocery store. Might have mentioned that spreading rumors about our family finances was inappropriate and hurtful. You're welcome. I laughed out loud, showing Olivia the follow-up message. Well, she said, grinning. Look who's stepping up as a supportive brother. The small gesture touched me more deeply than I would have expected. Tyler, who had always been absorbed in his own world, had actually defended me to a gossip-mongering neighbor. It was a tiny thing, yet it represented a significant shift in our relationship. The next day at work, I found myself approaching Victoria's office during the afternoon lull. After a brief knock, I entered to find her reviewing reports at her desk. Emma, come in, she said warmly. What can I do for you? I sat in the chair across from her desk, hands clasped in my lap to hide their slight trembling. I wanted to ask your advice about something professional, if you have a moment. She set aside her papers, giving me her full attention. Of course. I've been thinking about pursuing some additional education in international business, possibly with the goal of working abroad at some point. The words came easier now, with practice. I was wondering if you had any insights or recommendations, given your experience working in our London office. Victoria's eyes lit up with interest. That's an excellent direction for someone with your skills, Emma. The global perspective is invaluable in our field. She leaned forward slightly. What particular regions interest you? Asia, primarily. I've always been drawn to Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, markets that blend Eastern and Western business practices. She nodded thoughtfully. As it happens, we've been discussing expanding our APAC division. Nothing concrete yet, but definitely on the horizon. Someone with your financial acumen and cultural background could be a tremendous asset in that space. My heart quickened at the possibility. That would be incredible. Let me put together some resources for you. Programs I'd recommend, contacts who might be helpful, and when you're ready to make a move in that direction, I'd be happy to support you. I left her office feeling energized, possibilities unfurling before me that had long been tucked away as impractical fantasies. For the first time in years, I was making plans centered entirely around my own aspirations rather than others' needs. That evening, I added another entry to my journal, documenting the conversation with Victoria alongside my evolving thoughts about the future. As I wrote, I realized how much had changed in just a few weeks. The family crisis that had initially seemed like a disaster had become unexpectedly a catalyst for growth, not just for me, but potentially for all of us. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Your father and I visited 3 smaller homes today. One has a converted garage that could work as a music space for Tyler when he visits. Just FYI, no pressure about Sunday dinner. Love you. The consideration, researching. Homes with space for Tyler while also respecting my boundary about Sunday dinner felt like another small step forward. I typed back, sounds promising. Let me know how the financial advisor meeting goes. Love you too. As I set my phone aside and returned to my journal, a sense of cautious hope settled over me. The road ahead would still have obstacles. Old patterns reasserting themselves, moments of backsliding, difficult conversations yet to be had. But for the first time, I could envision a future where my relationships with my family were built on mutual respect, rather than unspoken expectations and one-sided sacrifice. I closed my journal and walked to the balcony of my apartment, looking out at the Portland skyline glittering against the darkening sky. The city that had once felt like a compromise, close enough to help my family, far enough to have some independence, now felt like a launching pad for whatever might come next. Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, places I'd dreamed of exploring, cultures I'd longed to experience firsthand. The possibilities whispered to me on the evening breeze. No longer distant fantasies, but potential realities taking shape on the horizon. For tonight, though, I was content to stand in this moment, balanced between the past I was redefining and the future I was reclaiming, one boundary, one conversation, one choice at a time. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through my apartment windows as I sipped coffee and contemplated the day ahead. After much consideration, I decided to attend family dinner, not out of obligation, but as a conscious choice to engage with the evolving dynamic. My phone sat on the counter, the text I'd sent to Mom last night still visible on the screen. "I'll be there at 5. Can I bring anything?" Her response had been immediate and warm. "Just yourself. That's all we need." The simple message represented a subtle but significant shift. No guilt, no manipulation, just genuine welcome. I spent the morning updating my resume, incorporating international experience and language skills that I'd previously downplayed. The process felt both practical and symbolic, reclaiming aspects of my identity that had been sidelined during years of prioritizing others' needs. By mid-afternoon, nervous energy had me reorganizing my entire closet, a task I'd been postponing for months. As I sorted through clothes, I came across a box tucked in the back corner containing mementos from college, including a brochure for the Taiwan exchange program I'd almost applied to before my parents' concerns had swayed me. The glossy pages showed smiling students against a backdrop of Taipei's skyline, promises of adventure and growth captured in carefully crafted marketing copy. I set it aside rather than returning it to the box. A reminder, perhaps, that old dreams needn't remain permanently shelved. At 4:30, I slid into my car, a small gift bag on the passenger seat containing a jar of my mother's favorite jasmine, tea. Not an obligation, I reminded myself. A choice. The mantra had become important in my ongoing effort to redefine family relationships. The drive to Beaverton felt both familiar and strange, the neighborhood sliding past my window like scenes from a movie I'd watched too many times to count. When I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home, I noticed subtle differences. The garden had been recently weeded, the porch swept clean, the welcome mat replaced with a newer version. Small efforts at renewal, perhaps mirroring the larger changes underway. I rang the doorbell rather than using my key. Another small boundary, another conscious choice. Mom answered almost immediately, her face lighting up with a smile that held both happiness and uncertainty. "Emma, you came!" She pulled me into a hug that smelled of home-cooked food and that familiar jasmine perfume. "I said I would," I reminded her gently, returning the embrace before stepping inside. The house felt different somehow, tidier than usual, with fresh flowers on the entry table and the persistent clutter that had accumulated over the years noticeably reduced. "We've been organizing," Mom explained, following my gaze. "Getting ready for changes." The hesitation in her voice revealed how difficult this process was for her, making me appreciate the effort even more. "It looks nice," I said sincerely, handing her the gift bag. "For you. Just because." She peeked inside, her expression softening at the sight of the tea. "My favorite," Thank you, sweetheart. In the living room, Dad stood as I entered, his posture stiff but his eyes warmer than they'd been during our last encounters. Emma. He nodded, then added with visible effort, "It's good to see you." "You too, Dad." An awkward silence threatened to descend until Tyler emerged from the kitchen, an apron tied around his waist and a wooden spoon in hand. "Don't just stand there," he called. "The rice is almost done, and I need someone to taste test the stir-fry." The domestic scene was so unexpected, Tyler cooking rather than Mom, that I found myself momentarily speechless. "Your brother insisted on making dinner tonight," Mom explained, pride evident in her voice. "Said he's been watching cooking videos to learn how to make healthy meals on a budget." I followed them into the kitchen where the counters displayed evidence of Tyler's culinary efforts, vegetables neatly chopped, sauces measured into small bowls, a recipe propped against the backsplash. "Impressive," I said genuinely. He shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant, though I could see he was pleased by my reaction. "Figured if I'm going to be a responsible adult, I should probably learn to feed myself properly. Takeout 5 nights a week was killing my budget." The casual reference to our budgeting session made me smile. "How's the job application going?" "Got an interview next week," he replied, stirring the contents of a wok with surprising competence. "Part-time to start, but the director hinted there could be more hours if it goes well." "That's great, Tyler." "Yeah, well," he focused intently on the food. "Turns out there are worse things than having a steady paycheck." Mom squeezed his shoulder affectionately before turning to me. "Would you like some wine, Emma? We opened a nice Pinot Noir." "That would be lovely, thanks." As she poured the wine, I noticed Dad watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. When our eyes met, he didn't look away. "Your mother tells me you're considering international business courses," he said. The statement somewhere between a question and an observation. I nodded, accepting the wine glass Mom handed me. "I am. It's something I've been interested in for a long time." He seemed to choose his next words carefully. "I remember when you wanted to study in Taiwan your senior year. We discouraged that." The acknowledgement, simple as it was, took me by surprise. "Yes, you did." "We were afraid of you being so far away," he continued. "Of losing you, I suppose. But it seems we managed to do that anyway, just in a different way." The raw honesty in his voice touched me. "You haven't lost me, Dad. I'm just finding myself, setting boundaries, learning to prioritize my needs alongside everyone else's." He nodded slowly, absorbing this. "Your mother and I have been talking a lot about that. About how we've treated you differently than Tyler. Expected more, acknowledged less." He glanced toward his son, busy at the stove. "It wasn't fair." "No," I agreed softly. "It wasn't." "I can't change the past," he said, meeting my eyes directly. "But I can try to do better going forward. If you'll give us, that chance." The simple apology, unembellished but sincere, was more meaningful than any grand gesture could have been. "I'd like that." Tyler announced that dinner was ready, breaking the emotional moment. We gathered around the table, the familiar setting, now containing a new tentative energy as we navigated this shifting terrain together. The meal itself was surprisingly good. A vegetable stir-fry with perfectly cooked rice and a ginger sauce that balanced sweet and spicy notes expertly. "This is delicious," I said after a few bites. "Seriously, Tyler, I'm impressed." He grinned, clearly pleased. "Thanks. Those cooking channels are actually pretty helpful, and it's way cheaper than eating out all the time." "Speaking of finances," Mom said, setting down her fork. "We met with the financial advisor on Friday. She was very helpful." "What did she recommend?" I asked, genuinely curious. Mom and Dad exchanged glances. Downsizing, primarily, Dad answered. She confirmed what you've been saying, that the current house is more than we can reasonably maintain on our incomes. We're going to list it next month, Mom added. We've found a smaller place that we really like. 2 bedrooms instead of 3, but a nice converted garage space that could work as a music room or guest area. I nodded, recognizing the property she'd mentioned in her text. That sounds practical. It's in the same school district, Dad said, a hint of his old defensiveness creeping in. So I can still teach at Westview without a long commute. That's good, I said sincerely. Continuity is important. The financial advisor also suggested we consolidate our debts and create a proper retirement plan, Mom continued. She said we've only got about 10 years to build up our savings if we want to retire with any security. The fact that they were discussing these details openly, without shame or deflection, represented significant progress. I took a sip of wine, choosing my next words carefully. I'm glad you found her advice helpful. Financial planning can make a huge difference in reducing stress. She said pretty much everything you've been trying to tell us for years, Tyler interjected, serving himself more stir-fry. But somehow hearing it from a stranger with credentials made it more acceptable. Dad frowned slightly at this assessment, but didn't dispute it. Instead, he cleared his throat and said, the advisor also suggested we create a formal agreement for any family financial support. Proper documentation, clear terms, that sort of thing. I raised an eyebrow. That's actually excellent advice. She said it protects everyone involved, Mom explained, prevents misunderstandings and ensures everyone's expectations are aligned. Which brings us to something we wanted to discuss with you, Dad continued, setting down his fork. The 3 months of transitional mortgage payments you mentioned. We'd like to document those properly, with your name on the paperwork so there's a record of your contribution. The offer represented such a fundamental shift in approach that I felt momentarily speechless. After years of invisible support, they were suggesting official acknowledgement. I think that's very reasonable, I said finally. Thank you for suggesting it. A tension I hadn't fully registered seemed to ease from Dad's shoulders. Good. Good. The advisor can help us draw up the appropriate documents. I'm contributing too, Tyler added. $400 a month like we discussed. Got it all written out in that budget app you recommended. The meal continued with conversation, flowing more naturally than it had in years. Mom shared gossip about neighbors without the usual judgment. Dad talked about a student who'd made remarkable progress in his class. Tyler described his ideas for structuring beginner guitar lessons if he got the teaching position. And I found myself sharing more than usual as well. Details about challenging projects at work, amusing anecdotes from my volunteer sessions, even my tentative thoughts about international opportunities. As we cleared the dishes together, Mom said quietly, "Your father and I found some photo albums while organizing. There's one from your study abroad semester in Japan during college. We thought we might look through it later, if you're interested." The suggestion, this expression of interest in a part of my life they'd previously dismissed as impractical, touched me deeply. I'd like that. While Tyler and Dad loaded the dishwasher, Mom led me to the living room where several albums lay on the coffee table. She opened one to reveal photos of my 20-year-old self standing beneath cherry blossoms, exploring temples, studying in libraries with new friends. "You look so happy here," she observed, touching one image gently. "So alive." I confirmed. That semester changed me, opened my eyes to different ways of living, working, building community. She turned the page to a group photo of my study cohort, all of us grinning widely in front of Tokyo Tower. "And then you came home and got that job at the investment firm and never mentioned international work again." There was a question in her statement, one I answered honestly. You and Dad were so relieved when I took that job. So proud of the stability, the benefits, the proximity to home. It seemed easier to adapt my dreams than to disappoint you. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Oh, Emma, we never meant to clip your wings. We were just so afraid of losing you to distance. I know that now, I said gently, but at the time, it felt like rejection of something that mattered deeply to me. Dad and Tyler joined us, carrying coffee and the dessert, a homemade cheesecake that was clearly Mom's contribution. To the meal? What are we looking at? Tyler asked, setting down the tray. Emma's semester in Japan, Mom explained, making room for them on the couch. To my surprise, Dad picked up one of the photos, me in front of a Tokyo financial district building, looking professional in a business casual outfit for a site visit. You always had a gift for languages, he said thoughtfully. Your Japanese instructor told us that at the parent conference. Said you had an ear for nuance that most students lacked. The decades-old compliment, remembered and shared now, felt like a belated acknowledgement of a path not taken. I've been thinking about brushing up on my Japanese, I admitted. Maybe adding Mandarin as well, for business purposes. You should, Dad said, setting the photo down carefully. You'd be good at it. The simple encouragement, free from qualifications or warnings about practicality, was perhaps the most meaningful gift he could have offered. As we enjoyed the cheesecake, the conversation continued to flow more easily than it had in years. When Tyler mentioned struggling to find an affordable apartment closer to downtown where most music venues were located, I found myself offering genuine advice rather than judgment. The Williams district has some reasonable options, I suggested. Not as trendy as some areas, but good transit connections and a growing art scene. Really? I hadn't considered that area. He pulled out his phone, making a note. Thanks, I'll check it out. The exchange, practical, supportive, adult to adult, epitomized the emerging dynamics between us. No longer the responsible sister, lecturing the irresponsible brother, but two adults sharing information and respecting each other's choices. By the time I prepared to leave, the evening had stretched to nearly 3 hours, longer than I'd planned, but without the usual sense of relief at escape. When I stood to go, Mom hugged me tightly. This was wonderful, she whispered. Having you here, really here, not just physically present, but emotionally engaged. It was good, I agreed, returning the embrace. Different, but good. Dad's hug was briefer, but no less genuine. We're trying, Emma, he said quietly. I'm trying. I know, I assured him. And I appreciate that more than I can express. Tyler walked me to my car, the spring evening cool but pleasant. So, he said, hands in his pockets, that went better than expected. Much better, I agreed. They've been different since you confronted them, he observed. More thoughtful, less stuck in their ways. Dad actually listened to my opinion about something the other day. Nearly fell over from shock. I smiled, unlocking my car. Change isn't easy for anyone, but especially for parents who are used to being the ones with all the answers. True. He shuffled his feet, then looked up with unexpected seriousness. I wanted to thank you, actually. Not just for the budget help, but for, I don't know, breaking the pattern, I guess. Making everyone take a hard look at how we've been operating as a family. The maturity in his words surprised and moved me. You're welcome. Though I have to admit, I didn't expect it to lead to you cooking dinner for everyone. He laughed. Yeah, well, turns out I actually enjoy it. And Mom's been teaching me some of the Taiwanese recipes Grandma used to make. It's cool learning about that part of our heritage. Another unexpected development, Tyler connecting with our cultural background in ways he'd previously shown little interest in. I'm proud of you, I said sincerely. For the cooking, the job application, the budgeting, all of it. You're really stepping up. He shrugged. though I could tell the words meant something to him. Yeah, well, figured it was time to stop being the family screw-up. Especially since you're potentially going all international businesswoman on us. I raised an eyebrow. I wouldn't go that far yet, just exploring possibilities. You should do it, he said with unexpected firmness. You've put your life on. Hold long enough. Besides, he added with a grin, I'd get serious cool points having a sister working in Singapore or Hong Kong. Could maybe crash on your couch when I do my Asian tour. Getting a bit ahead of yourself there, I teased, though the casual assumption that I would pursue this path, and that he supported it, warmed me. As I drove home, the evening replayed in my mind, not perfect by any means, with moments of old tensions flaring and new boundaries being tested, but fundamentally different from the family gatherings of the past. More honest, more equal, more hopeful. Back in my apartment, I added the latest developments to my journal, recognizing that what had begun as a record of pain and boundary setting was evolving into a chronicle of growth and healing, not just my own, but my entire family's. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. How did it go? Do you need emergency ice cream therapy? I smiled, typing back, actually went well. Real conversation, real progress. No emergency dessert needed. But rain check on that ice cream anyway? Her response came quickly. Absolutely. So proud of you for navigating this with such grace. Grace wasn't the word I would have chosen for my journey. Messy, painful, and uncertain seemed more accurate descriptors. But perhaps she saw something I couldn't yet recognize from the inside. The following week brought tangible evidence of the shifting family dynamic. Mom texted photos of houses they were considering, asking my opinion without pressure. Dad sent an article about a financial analysis program in Hong Kong with a simple message. Thought this might interest you. Tyler forwarded confirmation of his interview at the music school with excited emojis. Small gestures, but collectively, they represented a fundamental recalibration of how we communicated and supported each other. At work, I scheduled a meeting with Victoria to discuss international opportunities more concretely. Her enthusiasm and practical advice helped transform vague aspirations into actionable steps. Language refresher courses, specialized certifications, networking events with the company's Asia-Pacific division. There's a conference in Singapore this fall, she mentioned during our discussion. We typically send representatives from senior management, but I could make a case for including you if you're serious about this direction. I am, I confirmed, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Very serious. Good, she said, making a note. I'll put your name forward. In the meantime, I'd suggest you refresh your Japanese and start on basic Mandarin. Having language skills, even rudimentary ones, makes a significant difference in those markets. I left her office with a reading list, contact information for language tutors, and a tentative timeline that made the possibility of working abroad within a year seem not just possible, but probable. That evening, I called my parents, something I rarely initiated in the past, to share the developments. Their response, cautiously supportive rather than discouraging, confirmed that our recent conversations had genuinely impacted their perspective. Singapore is supposed to be very safe, Mom noted, clearly having done some research. And they say the food is amazing. The business environment there is world-class, Dad added. Very forward-thinking. You'd learn a lot. The absence of warnings, concerns, or guilt was striking. When I commented on this, Dad sighed audibly. We're trying, Emma. Learning to see you as the capable adult you are, not the child we still sometimes picture. He paused. It's not easy changing patterns of thinking that are decades old, but we're committed to it. I appreciate that, I said sincerely. And I recognize it goes both ways. I'm working on seeing you both as complex individuals with your own fears and hopes, not just as the parents who didn't understand me. The mutual acknowledgement of effort felt significant, an adult conversation about the work of building healthier relationships, rather than a one-sided push for change. Before ending the call, Mom mentioned that they'd received an offer on the house. It's a good price, enough to pay off the remaining mortgage and put a substantial down payment on the smaller place we like. The financial advisor says we're making the right choice. The news, delivered without resentment or blame, represented real progress. That's excellent, Mom. I'm happy for you. Your father is still adjusting to the idea, she admitted, but he's coming around. The buyer has 2 children who would be at Westview, so knowing his teaching legacy will continue. With them helps. These small insights into my father's perspective, his attachment to his teaching legacy, his struggle to reconcile downsizing with his sense of success, helped me see him more fully as a person, rather than just a role in my life. After the call, I opened my laptop and booked a Japanese language refresher course and an introductory Mandarin class, both starting the following month. The concrete action, small as it was, represented a commitment to myself, to pursuing dreams I'd deferred for too long. As spring turned to early summer, the family transformation continued to unfold in ways both subtle and profound. My parents sold their house and began the process of downsizing, approaching the task with unexpected enthusiasm once the initial shock had passed. It's actually freeing, Mom confessed during one of our now regular phone calls. All these things we've been holding on to for decades, so many without real meaning or purpose. It feels good to let them go. Tyler secured the teaching position at the music school, starting with beginner classes 2 evenings a week and Saturday mornings. His excitement about sharing his passion with young students revealed a depth I hadn't previously recognized in him. It's weird, he told me over coffee one weekend. I always thought teaching would feel like giving up on performing, but it's actually inspiring me to create more, knowing I'm helping others connect with music. Our relationship had evolved into something resembling friendship, still with the underlying bond of siblings, but with a new mutual respect that made our interactions genuinely enjoyable rather than obligatory. And I continued methodically pursuing the international business path, each step building confidence in my decision. The language courses, networking events, and specialized training became pieces of a foundation for the future I was actively constructing rather than merely dreaming about. 3 months after our initial confrontation, exactly as promised, I made the final transitional mortgage payment to my parents' account. This time, however, it was documented with proper paperwork acknowledging my contribution, a symbolic as well as practical difference from the years of invisible support. To mark the occasion, we held a family dinner at my apartment, the first time they had visited my space not as critics but as guests. Mom brought Taiwanese dumplings she and Tyler had made together. Dad contributed a bottle of champagne, while I prepared the rest of the meal. As we raised our glasses in a toast, Dad cleared his throat with uncharacteristic emotion. To new beginnings, he said simply, and to Emma, whose courage forced us all to grow. The acknowledgement, freely given without prompting or expectation, touched something deep within me. To family, I replied, redefined, rebuilt, but still ours. Later, as they prepared to leave, Mom handed me a small wrapped package. A little something to celebrate your new direction, she explained. Inside was a leather-bound travel journal, the cover embossed with a simple compass rose. The first page held an inscription in my mother's elegant handwriting. For Emma, who always finds her true north, may your adventures be as boundless as your spirit. With love and respect, Mom and Dad. The carefully chosen words, especially respect, a quality I'd long sought from them, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. It's perfect, I said, hugging them both. Thank you. After they left, I sat on my balcony with the journal open. Before me, reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this point, what had begun as a painful confrontation over finances had evolved into a profound recalibration of relationships, expectations, and possibilities. I had set boundaries not to push my family away, but to create space for healthier connections. They had faced uncomfortable truths, not as failures, but as opportunities for growth. Together, we had begun to forge something new from the remnants of old patterns that no longer served any of us. The future remained unwritten. My potential move abroad, my parents' adjustment to their new home, Tyler's evolving career path. But the foundation we now stood upon felt solid in ways it never had before. Built on honesty rather than obligation, respect rather than role fulfillment, mutual support rather than one-sided sacrifice. As I wrote the first entry in my new travel journal, I found myself filled with genuine excitement for what lay ahead. Not just for the professional opportunities on the horizon, but for the continuing evolution of my most fundamental relationships. Family, I was learning, wasn't a fixed entity, but a living system capable of growth, adaptation, and renewal. The painful process of confronting long-established dynamics had ultimately created space for something more authentic to emerge, something that honored everyone's full humanity rather than confining us to rigid roles. Opening my laptop, I confirmed my registration for the Singapore conference Victoria had mentioned, the decision feeling both terrifying and absolutely right. As I clicked Submit, I felt a profound sense of alignment, as if the various parts of myself that had long been compartmentalized were finally working in harmony. The journey hadn't ended. In many ways, it was just beginning. But for the first time, I was moving forward with my whole self, not just the dutiful daughter, responsible, sister, or competent professional, but the complete, complex woman who encompassed all these facets and more. My parents had called me lazy after I paid their mortgage for 5 years. When I finally stood up for myself, they kicked me out of family gatherings. But now, we were writing a different ending to that story. One where truth, painful as it sometimes was, ultimately set all of us free. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.